Some people have asked me, what do I do when my memory palace is full? Do I have to make a new memory palace before I can memorize new things? And the answer is no. The memory palace is actually infinite in capacity. There is no limit to what you can memorize using it. Right now, I'm going to try to explain why that's the case. To begin with, I think the metaphor of a mind palace may mislead us a little bit. We think of a palace as being a place, and in a place you put things, like you're putting furniture into the rooms of a castle. Well, no matter how big the castle is, eventually you run out of space. Eventually you've hit the capacity, then you have to think about expanding it or building a new castle. But that's not the way the memory palace is. I think a better metaphor for thinking about it is that the memory palace is a kind of pattern. It is like having proper form when you're doing a push-up. If you learn the right way to do a push-up, how to hold your arms and your elbows, how to keep your back tight, there's no limit to the number of push-ups you can do. You don't ever go to the coach and say, "Coach, what do I do when I've done all the push-ups, when I run out of push-ups to do?" You simply apply the form again to do them in a new location on a new day. The memory palace is a lot like that. It's the right form to use in organizing your memories to make them easy to recall. And provided you're using the form correctly, there's no limit to its application. To understand why, let's talk about how the memory palace works. It works by combining the familiar with the unfamiliar. Now, the familiar are these locations, these loci in my home or in some other location where I am every day. Recall that we should be choosing these as fixed locations in a sequence that we go through every single day. My method of loci, my memory palace begins with my keys rack. I come in through my back door, I look down, and right at about elbow height on my left is the keys rack, and I put my keys there every single day when I come home. I take 3 steps forward, and on the right is the sink. I turn left, 4 steps forward, and there's the freezer. So I'm picking large objects in a certain sequence that I walk every single day. The reason this is helpful to me is that sequence is invariant. The freezer and the sink never change places, and I'm familiar with it. I know it by heart. There's no effort required for me to remember the layout of my kitchen and the rest of my house, for example. The memory palace technique combines the familiar locations in sequence with the unfamiliar images that I'm loading into these locations. So for each location, I'm picking some sort of exaggerated or unusual association with it. So I don't want my first memory to be keys being put on the keys rack. And that's too ordinary. I would never be able to remember that because it's not striking and unusual. Instead, one of my previous videos, my first example was to remember the name Linus. And so I remember Linus's blanket from Peanuts hanging on the hook of my keys rack. Why is this memorable? It's memorable because it's my keys rack. That's the familiar part. But blankets don't normally hang on it. Only keys hang on it. So to see a blanket on my keys rack is the unusual association that causes me to remember the owner of that blanket, named Linus. So why does this work? This works because human brains are exceptionally good at recognizing patterns, and especially breaks in patterns. So think about the evolutionary adaptive value of this, our ancestors on the savannah. The fellow who can recognize that there's a shadow in the tall grass 100 yards distant that wasn't there just a couple of minutes ago is the guy who can recognize that he's being stalked by a lion. He's the guy who's got a tremendous survival advantage over people who don't notice that. So regardless of its origin, we humans have brains that are very exquisitely attuned to spotting anomalies in familiar environments. You may have had the experience before of walking into a room and stopping because something is out of place, something's unusual, something has changed, even if you can't pinpoint it at first. Then after a little bit of examination, you may find, yes, something's been moved or something is new that wasn't supposed to be there. We're using that instinct, that deeply embedded trait in human brains when we employ the memory palace technique, by combining the familiar with the unfamiliar. So to wrap up, I think the better image to use, instead of thinking of cramming furniture into the rooms of a palace, think of the memory palace technique as a pattern, like good form in doing a push-up, that will allow you to produce a series of chains. You're producing a series of linked memories where the first chain is keyed to your first location, the second link to the second location, and these chains all go off in different directions. The only real challenge for you then is to remember the first link in the chain. It's for me to remember Linus's blanket hanging on my keys rack. The first link then will carry you to the second link. For me, I look at the keys rack to my left, I walk 3 steps forward and turn right, and then I see whatever it is that's at the sink in that when I've programmed that location for that particular chain in my memory palace. So that's my attempt to explain how it is that the memory palace can have an infinite capacity, and there can be no limit to the number of things you can memorize using it. I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching today. Goodbye.